Okay, our next speaker is James Skidmore, and his talk is going to be AI in teaching, AI learning, practical and ethical considerations. Right? Take it away.
Thank you. Hi everyone, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. My talk is not very high level. It's more like on the ground as to what one does in the classroom, so to speak, and in the classroom that I kind of teach in, which is language and culture classroom. So I don't teach much language anymore, but I teach a lot of film studies, literary studies, cultural studies, things like that. If you want to, there's a QR code. All of this is online, what I'm presenting, so you can find everything by using that QR code or by use one of those wonderful, either one of those URLs will get you where you need to be. And there's a lot of information that's out here on this presentation. I'll speak to some of it I'll skip over, but it's all available to you if you want. So my interest in this is less the kind of ethical implications that we just heard about from Karen, and more about the issues that speak to what goes on in the classroom. I think that when you look at the research and the commentary that's being done on AIED, the artificial intelligence in education, it's assuming a lot of things about what education is. It assumes that education is kind of a uniform enterprise, that it's all done the same way in every field and that kind of thing. And of course it isn't. And generalizations, of course, we can't avoid them in this kind of discussion, but I want to dig a little deeper and get a little bit past those kinds of generalizations. One thing I also want to point out right from the beginning is if I'm trying to understand if I'm trying to form an ethical understanding or an understanding of the ethics of AI, I have to understand then the, how do I put it here, kind of an underlying premise as to what we're doing when we teach. What is the goal of our educational practice? What are we trying to accomplish? And if your view of education is what I would call more transactional, utilitarian enterprise, equipping students, I should have rewritten that, where universities sell student credentials that will help them secure employment careers. That's a little awkwardly worded, but the whole point of that, I think, is clear. AI may not be perceived as a tech, may be perceived as a really useful tool to get where you want to go. But if you approach education from the point of view where education, especially higher education and university education, is about understanding the world and humanity, or if it's about giving students the agency to become independent and autonomous learners to do that kind of work, then AI may feel threatening to you, and with good reason. So I want to look at a little bit of that. My talk is pretty straightforward. First I'll tell you what I'm not going to talk about, so if you don't have any expectations or that I talk about something I don't. Then I'll tell you what I am. I'm going to talk about what I'm going to talk about, and then I'll talk about some implications. And then there's some, that bottom, more things to talk and think about. There are just some references to different readings, etc., that you can look at if you want. Some of them I'll reference in the talk, and so on. And this is all Creative Commons license, so make use of anything you see here that you like. It's all for everyone. So what I'm not going to talk about are some of the things we just heard about, the bias, environmental damage, inclusion, equity, etc. It's not that I don't think they're not important. It's simply because I want to focus on a different aspect of the ethical implications of AI in education. So I just want to get that right off the bat so that you don't kind of question, well, why didn't you talk about that? Now you know why. What I am going to talk about I want to focus on the work that's going on inside the classroom. And there's a lot of work with AI inside the classrooms. Some of it's, and I guess I should point it right off the bat. When I'm talking about AI, I'm kind of using that as a general term. I might be referring to generative AI. I might be referring to AI-assisted kind of tools or AI-enhanced kind of tools. I'm using it as a blanket term. And I know there are differences there, but I want to make sure that's clear. Anyways, so what's going on inside the classroom and how that's, and what those ethical implications are. We have how to put this here, we have ethical frameworks in our universities, right? You could say they're imposed upon us, but they're generally done by consensus. And there are ethical frameworks at the University of Waterloo, what is permitted and not permitted in terms of teaching and learning. Right? So we, for example, plagiarism, using somebody's work and not crediting that work, etc., in your own work, well, that's considered an ethical code violation at the University of Waterloo. Most people accept that, they understand that that's the case. And so Waterloo's framework for AI is very much, it's left to the instructor, and most universities are like this. Colleges maybe less so in Ontario there. It's left to the instructor to determine what level of use of AI you're going to use. Right? You can go completely wild and just have at it, use AI in anything you do in this class. You can ban it completely, say AI is not permitted in any way, shape, or form, or you can go anywhere in between. And it's up to the instructor then to make that point. My interest in this is not about, well, where should instructors land in that continuum. And if you check out this AI assessment scale thing there, it gives you kind of good descriptions of the different levels of AI involvement in teaching and learning. I'm not interested in saying where an instructor should land. I'm interested in understanding, well, wherever you do land, what are the ethical implications of that use? What does that imply? And what does it entail? So I want to look at two things. I want to look at learning, and then I want to look at teaching. So basically learning is kind of the student view of this, or the student involvement with AI. And then the teaching view is kind of like what's the instructor's involvement with AI. And there are ethical implications for both. The ones on the teaching side we don't consider enough, I don't think, in our discussions about AI. The ones with learning, we do already quite a bit. So this is a little survey I did with my students in a course I teach right now, World Cinema and Visual Culture. I asked them, how do you use AI in your studies? And this is what they told me. So, and they could check more than one. So a good portion of students said, I don't use it at all. This is 100 students, right? This is not a scientific survey, etc. It's just kind of a snapshot, it's an anecdote, but it gives a way for us to focus our attention, to focus our discussion. I use it to get that quick information, tax definitions, coding. A lot of my students, I teach a lot of general ed courses. I have students in other programs who have to do coding, and they use it for coding, even though it's forbidden from using coding in their classes, but they do. Very few say that they paste it directly into their work. Believe that or not, as you wish, but that's what they say. That may be an aspirational 1.2%, 1.02%, but let's take it as it is, at face value for time being. And then I use it to review written assignments, etc. And then I use it for everything, and well, I don't know how true that is. They might have been just playing along with me and just answering that. But it's interesting that there's that kind of, when you look at that, you see quickly that 1.02% is so low compared to the other ones. And that to me indicates that students have a clear sense of, well, what's right or wrong in this, right? They have a sense of what would be cheating in this context. And cheating would be getting the information and plugging it in, no questions asked. So there's that sense that in one way, that's good. There's an understanding of kind of an ethical understanding, if we want to say that, on the part of the students.
Is it just anonymous?
Pardon me?
Anonymous, the survey?
Yes. So what I also find interesting is that the use of AI has become this learning aid. And I think about when I think about how students function today in 2023, I think about how I functioned as a student as an undergrad in 1983, so 40 years ago. When I was a student 40 years ago, doing my BA in French and German at the University of Saskatchewan, of course we had none of this. We didn't even have the internet, so you know that. We didn't have any of this. And so when I needed to find the kinds of information that I was looking for, I was in a class and I hear terms that I didn't understand, and of course I was, I'm a professor, so I'm probably on the side of the type of student who's more kind of eager and wants to learn, etc. But I would always find myself in the library because I had to look things up. Encyclopedia Britannica, this dictionary, that dictionary. The reference room was my second home many times, it felt like. Especially when I went into grad studies there and then in the US. So yeah, I was always in the reference rooms because I was always looking up the kind of information that would kind of give me a clarity on a particular concept, idea, issue, historical event, etc. The information, get enough information I needed so I could fill that gap in my understanding of something else I was looking. That's what we often do. And of course now, students don't have to hunt that down. They simply have to ask for it. That's what AI gives people. You just ask for it, ask and you shall receive, right? And so for me, that becomes really interesting because that instantaneous kind of response changes how you approach the gathering of information and how you work. And so I think students have then a whole different, that generation now has a whole different approach to information. They can get it when they want to get it and be done with it in a way, almost. I also find it interesting that and this has happened where I've had students, taking the chunk of stuff and putting it in and then I catch them and confront them on it, and then tears ensue because they got cheating. And when students cheat, some cheat just out of kind of a habit, right? This is how they're going to get through things. There are students like that, let's admit it. There are also students who cheat more, and this is probably more common. They cheat, by cheat I mean, do things that aren't allowed under our system of guidelines. Out of panic, out of stress, out of the things that happen to all of us. And I understand that stress and that panic can lead to making bad decisions. I don't want people to feel, forever condemned because of that. But with that instantaneous availability of AI, it's so much easier to use it, that kind of information. So how does this translate into kind of what's going on in classes? So here are a couple of examples from 2 courses. So like an example in an in a language course. Students are using online translation systems. Okay? Just mention those, you have Google Translate, DeepL, these sorts of things. And yeah, there's the kind of things that we saw in the previous, about the gender pronouns and that sort of thing. That is a problem with students, with learners, and especially learners who are at the beginning of their learning in a particular language, don't have the understanding or knowledge of that language to realize how the translations will go wonky on them because they're not controlling for all of those kind of variables, because that language does it differently than the language they're most comfortable with. And you see this, for example, in German. If you put into Google Translate, I don't know, the teacher spoke to the doctor. Well, it'll often come up that the teacher is masculine and the doctor is masculine and the teacher is feminine. why? Right? So, okay, it's not kind of biased that comes up. And the students may not have enough knowledge yet to know that these are gendered. So that's an issue. But the general problem is that when students are using these tools to generate, say they have to do dialogues for a class, so they have to produce some sort of language output. And they'll use these tools that are AI enhanced to generate that dialogue, and it'll give them structures and vocabulary, etc., that they haven't studied yet. Then, of course, first of all, it's an instant flag for the instructor. But more importantly, it's robbing them of the opportunity to learn that. They just haven't learned it. And that's problematic from the basic understanding of how we learn and acquire knowledge. In the second example, using AI to polish one's paper. So I had a student actually do this in the class that I'm teaching right now, this world cinema course. And I discovered this and sat down with her and we talked about it. She, yes, I use this all the time, and here's how I use it. And so I had her do her next paper. She provided me then with her whole process of using it. It was very sophisticated. It was a very sophisticated approach to writing. She's a non-native speaker of English, but her English is very good. And she said to me, well, I'm at university now, first year student. I know I need to write professionally and I need to write well, so I want to make use of all the things. So what she does, she writes a draft, she feeds it into ChatGPT or some Gen AI system. It spits out then an improved version. She takes that to Grammarly and runs it through Grammarly and works on it again. And then she fiddles with it herself a bit, and then she hands in that final copy. If you put that through an AI checker, of course it comes out like 95% AI. But the student has actually been very sophisticated in her use of that tool. My concern isn't with then her, I don't consider her cheating in that regard. That's not the problem for me. She hasn't cheated. She's used tools that are available to her, and she's used them intelligently. My concern is that she's robbing herself of the opportunity to develop her own voice. We're talking about how all the sentences are going to be the same. Well, yeah, that's one of the big problems with AI as a writing tool, is that it's always the 5-paragraph structure. The last paragraph always starts in conclusion, and it becomes bland and yucky writing. And the concern for me is that then the student won't be finding her voice. I wouldn't go so far as to say, oh, say it any way you want, because I disagree a little bit with what the previous speaker said, because one of the points of helping students understand how to speak in different ways or communicate in different ways is so they can communicate with different audiences. It's not so much about how I represent myself through language, that's of course part of what we communicate, but it's also about how do I connect with an audience. If my audience has an expectation of a certain style of writing or communication, it might behoove me to follow up on that so that they feel comfortable with what I'm giving them in terms of the content of the information. Not in every instance, not in every circumstance, but that's something we have to remember about communication. It's not just about me representing me, but it's about me communicating with someone else. So they're part of that, and we need to respect that. So here's this concern is that we as instructors is kind of thrown into being the mall cops of learning. And I didn't sign up to be a mall cop. But the more important thing is that if my desire for students and my interest in education is that students develop real good skills and abilities and to make real valuable contributions to the world, society, to who they are, to who we are. And if they rely too much on some of these tools, to me that's an ethical consideration because it's diminishing their learning. Let me go to the considerations for teaching. There we go. So, same class, I asked them another question. What's your opinion on instructor use of AI to create course materials? 5% said no problem. And some said I have some problems, and quite a few said I have some problems. And a fair number said, I have a great many problems with that. And that becomes then another ethical consideration. And this is the one that I don't think we deal enough with in our discussions of AI use. So imagine you're a student in a class where the prof has banned or severely restricted the use of AI, but you discover the prof is using AI in their work. At a minimum, that's hypocritical. I would go further and say that's an ethical kind of, that's a breach of trust. And a breach of trust has serious ethical implications. So, for example, Perusall, which is this annotation, it's a collective annotation kind of something. You know it. Waterloo, we have Perusall. You might know Hypothesis, which is a similar thing. Sorry, that's not the technical terms here. Anyways, you can collaboratively annotate texts. And this is a great tool. You give students a reading and you say, here, pose a couple of questions, they have to respond to them, or they have to highlight passages they think are important, discuss them. It's a great learning tool, great way to kind of create an asynchronous conversation about a text. They also allow for automated grading, and that's now AI enhanced. It was already, AI was already sneaking in there before we had the great AI explosion of like 2 years ago now. But AI was already sneaking into the coding and into the algorithm work and all that. You folks, the technical folks, who understand that much better than I do. But so profs have the ability now to assign this material and have AI grade it. I'm not sure that's, is that an ethically responsible choice to make in terms of teaching? It's very efficient. And if you and we talk a lot about teaching to scale, and we'll get in that discussion in a second. Teaching to scale. Well, then that implies then that you want to do a lot more. You have a lot more students in the class. How are you going to grade all of that? How are you going to keep up with all of that? Then that is what helps you. You can use AI to deliver reference information. So I do this in some of my classes. I use Perplexity. I think, are you aware of Perplexity AI? It's guys from OpenAI who left OpenAI and created Perplexity AI. The reason I like it is that it always references its outputs, right? It tells you, here's where I got this from. And there's an example there from the World Cinema course. I can show it to you quickly. So we were talking about affect theory in the course. And so this is the answer it gave them. It gave lots of different things, generally pretty good. I'm sure there's some things there that I quibble with. I quibble with everything I read. Anything that I want to present students, I'll want to make changes, right? That's normal. So I'm not too concerned about small issues, etc. The hallucination stuff, yeah, that's a problem. Fake references, that's a problem. So you want to check that. But it's pretty good. And and all the sources are there, and students can then follow up. And that's a good model of practice, in a way. That's an ethical use of AI, I guess you could say, because it provides a model of practice. You want to talk about something? Tell us where you're getting that information from. That's the basic premise there of complexity. But one thing we have to be, and that should say an ethical step up from ChatGPT. I think it is an ethical step up from that. But a lot of people fear, well, if you show it or use it in class, will that encourage students to use AI and lead them down the wrong path? Yeah, that could happen. I also teach, courses where I discuss Nazism and Hitler. I'm not going to teach that because I'm fearful that they might become Nazis, right? We can't live kind of scared of our shadows. But of course, we have to have an ethical approach, and as instructors, it's really important that we demonstrate that ethically. The third example of how instructors can use AI is course syllabus generation. I won't take you to the link, but the link is there. I'm not sure you're familiar with AI Teaching Assistant Pro of the service of Contact North. You can go into it and say, take your course description. You plunk it in, and it pops out. Here's your course. It'll give you learning outcomes. It'll give you a week-by-week breakdown of your course. Tell you what you should be teaching in terms of content, etc. Great. Who needs to spend weeks sweating before term starts to figure that out when you can just the night before generate a syllabus? Will that syllabus be perfect? Will it work? Of course not. You'll have to adjust it, right? Remember. But is that something an instructor should even do? And if at a minimum, if an instructor does that, it seems to me we're telling students, if you use AI, tell us how you used it. If I generate a syllabus using AI, I have to tell students I've generated the syllabus with AI. And then I have to live with the consequences of the students wondering, why am I paying $9,000 a term or a year to go to university and pay your salary when I can go and generate the syllabus on my own? That's an ethical question. I'm reluctant about using it. What's also interesting about that Teaching Assistant Pro is it'll generate exam questions on any topic. You just put in the topic, and it'll generate exams. So I play with it. So I put in, so I teach this film course. I put in, give me 10 multiple choice questions on this film. And it spits out 10 multiple choice questions. There's some hallucinating in there. They mention characters who don't exist, that kind of thing. You weed those out, so maybe a couple have to be, you have good questions. You have to create an exam. I guess you could do that. But the problem is, instructors who are doing that are not telling their students that they're doing that. And then that's, to me, unethical, because it's not transparent. Let me conclude. I know I'm talking too long. Don't complain. My students do that all the time. I've listed here then some 4 or 5 questions that I'm concerned about in terms of AI and the implications of AI, and somewhat Waterloo specific. And I'll just go through them very briefly, and then happy to have discussion and what have you. The first question is about AI is becoming embedded in everything, right? Apple Intelligence will be on all our phones in a couple of weeks. So will that affect the ability of learners to acquire knowledge in kind of a fundamental manner, the way I was kind of describing earlier? I think it will, and that could be problematic. It'll make information kind of disposable, as opposed not something you learn and incorporate into your intelligence, but something you grab, you use, you spit out, and you don't know it anymore. Waterloo's in the midst of a financial crisis. It's going to get worse before it gets better. There's lots of talk at the upper levels of the university administration about, scaling up, making use of AI to help solve this crisis. What does that mean for instruction? The university has a teaching incubator, which is this, kind of going to be on the cutting edge of instructional development. And they've asked for proposals for projects that can be funded through the teaching incubator. They have to incorporate AI in some fashion. How are they going to incorporate AI? Will it be about how can we incorporate AI so that we don't need TAs in the course? That's the kind of thing that will come from that. That's a concern. What are the long-term effects of the proliferation of AI for the very human connections that come with teaching and learning? And that I say that because yesterday I taught my last class in this World Cinema course. I was telling them at the end of the class how much I enjoyed the class and wonderful to work with you and good luck with all the work I've assigned you, etc. And this happens quite a bit. 15 or so students came up to me at the end of the course. They lined up to come and say thank you for the course and to talk to me and how they enjoyed it, etc. Great ego boost for me. There's no doubt about that. I was happy to hear that. But what struck me is that, gosh, what a human connection. Would you get that kind of a human connection with people? Would you really find like a community with if that instruction were much more AI influenced or AI overwhelmed by AI? That's a concern. Okay, maybe I'm thinking way too far in the future about the robot teaching in the classroom. But that worries me in the sense of, will we lessen the human community aspect of teaching and learning? Education is communal. I'm a big online instructor. I do a lot of online instruction and course development. But education, it has to be communal, I feel. And then the final kind of concern there is that this it's similar to what we, this acceleration towards goal-oriented learning. We acquire that nugget of knowledge at the expense of process-oriented learning. Process-oriented learning creates independent and autonomous individuals. Goal-oriented learning, I think, does that less so. I've spoken too long. Thanks for your attention. I really appreciate it. Happy to take questions.